San Francisco Bay Area is famous for many different things over its long history. Of course, it's well known for its steep hills, its trolley buses, its fantastic cuisine. And in the 1960s, if you happened to visit San Francisco, you probably would have seen quite a few Volkswagen microbuses. The surfer culture, the hippie lifestyle, and so many other nomadic folk brought to San Francisco by the humble Volkswagen microbus. That original Volkswagen microbus has not been in production now for many years, and we've seen plenty of iconic electric conversions over the years. But when Volkswagen decided to bring its ID.Buzz to the North American market as a long wheelbase version, there was, of course, only one city it could hold its launch event in: the San Francisco Bay Area. Granted, I'm currently not in San Francisco, but I've spent the day driving this in and around the region, and I'm about to tell you what I think after just a few hours behind the wheel.
I think I'm being nice. You never had it right in the first place. Don't you mess up twice. You'll end up all alone. Do you want to feel? And I feel that it's getting dangerous. And I feel that it's getting dangerous. And I feel that it's getting dangerous, dangerous, dangerous.
Volkswagen told us during the press briefing yesterday for this vehicle that it's celebrating its 75th anniversary in the US. And for a large part of that time, one of its most iconic vehicles was the Volkswagen microbus. And so Volkswagen has a lot of history tied in with this vehicle. And this vehicle has some pretty big shoes to fill. The original Volkswagen microbus was ubiquitous with the summer of love. It was ubiquitous with surfer dudes. It was ubiquitous for people who wanted to pack their lives into a tiny, affordable microbus and travel around the world. And if you owned a Volkswagen microbus, you probably have warm fuzzies whenever you see one on the road. And the design of the Volkswagen ID.Buzz is supposed to evoke that same emotional response in someone spotting it on the street. And in driving it today, I've only driven it for about 70 miles, I can tell you that the reaction from passers-by, from other drivers, is very much the, "Oh look, I know what that is." And we've had one person come up and say, "Hey, is that the new Volkswagen microbus?" And I had the pleasure of saying, "Well, yes, sir. Yes, it is." Of course, you can't have a Volkswagen microbus without having a ridiculous amount of versatility baked into the vehicle. And the ID.Buzz is based on Volkswagen's now very well established MEB platform, the modular electric vehicle toolkit that underpins basically the whole of Volkswagen's current lineup. So the ID.3, the ID.4, the ID.7, and the ID.Buzz. I haven't had a chance to drive the ID.7, and unfortunately I've not had time behind the wheel of the ID.3, but Kate Elliott has, and she really enjoyed it, and I certainly had some interesting time behind the wheel of the ID.4. But when I drove the ID.4, it was a couple of years ago, the MEB platform wasn't quite as mature as it now is. And you can definitely tell there's been a generational change between the ID.4 that I drove a couple of years ago and what I'm driving right now. I'm currently driving the rear-wheel drive variant of the ID.Buzz, that is effectively the entry-level model, although I'm kind of loath to call it an entry-level model given its price point, but we'll come to that later. Both versions of the ID.Buzz are powered by the same 91 kilowatt hour nominal, 87 kilowatt hour usable battery pack here in North America. The short wheelbase version, which is available in some markets, including Europe, isn't going to launch here in the US and Canada, although, you know, depending on where you live in the world, you might be able to have access to it. And then there are some different battery pack options that are not going to be made available here in North America. That battery pack, it's the largest battery pack that's been made available to the MEB platform to date, will give you an EPA range of 234 miles, which is about 377 kilometers for the rear-wheel drive variant, and slightly less than that if you go with the all-wheel drive variant. And it's not a huge difference. It's literally 3 or 4 miles difference in EPA range between the rear-wheel drive and the all-wheel drive. And that is very impressive. One of the reasons for that, though, is the fact that the ID.Buzz isn't exactly an aerodynamic vehicle. It's styled on the original Volkswagen microbus as best as can be possibly achieved with modern crash test standards. It has the aerodynamic qualities of a brick, and of course that means if you're going to be driving it on twisty roads like this in California, you're going to get much better range out of it than you would if you sat on the freeway. And I would hazard a guess that if you're somewhere where higher speed limits are common and you want to sit on the freeway at kind of 70, 80, maybe 90 miles per hour, your range is going to tank very, very quickly. But that's not the market that this vehicle is aimed at. And again, I'll come back to that a little bit later. Despite having very similar range between the rear and the all-wheel drive though, it is worth talking about the differences in the drivetrain. So the rear-wheel drive variant is the one I think that most closely aligns with the spirit of the original Volkswagen microbus, right? The original Volkswagen microbus was rear-engined, rear-wheel drive, and this vehicle that I'm currently driving is rear-wheel drive, rear motor. So the motor is obviously mounted in the back of the vehicle, and there's no motor driving the front wheels. That arrangement gives you 282 horsepower at the wheels, which is about 210 kilowatts. The all-wheel drive version, meanwhile, has a little bit more power. It has 335 horsepower, or about 250 kilowatts. And like some other all-wheel drive variants of EVs we've driven, this tells you one very important thing. It's not really about a change in performance per se, although it's worth noting that the all-wheel drive does the 0 to 60 miles per hour, so that's 0 to 98 kilometers per hour sprint in about 6 seconds, whereas the rear-wheel drive takes an extra second. So it is quicker if you want to buy the all-wheel drive. It's a much brisker acceleration. But really, the all-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive isn't about anything else other than the additional sure-footedness and tractability of the vehicle. And that's something that I am seeing here on the coast as I'm driving back towards San Francisco. This morning I had the opportunity to test drive the all-wheel drive variant of this car, basically a twin to this, but with all-wheel drive. And it went round corners. It went round corners in ways that a Volkswagen microbus really shouldn't be capable of doing. The rear-wheel drive feels just as poised and just as ready on the road. And I wasn't ready for that, because very often when a car company comes out with an all-wheel drive and a rear-wheel drive variant, or maybe an all-wheel drive and a front-wheel drive variant, there's a much more marked difference between how the vehicles drive. For this though, if you're driving it in a normal fashion, I can't tell a huge difference. Yes, under heavy acceleration with a rear-wheel drive vehicle, if there's no tractive power to the front wheels, you are going to find it's going to want to stemp out a little bit more, and maybe you're not going to be able to tuck the front end in the same way as you might with an all-wheel drive. But it's very impressive. Unfortunately, despite this road having a 55 miles per hour speed limit, I am stuck behind this Toyota Land Cruiser going in the 20s and not necessarily having the best road placement. But one thing I do want to talk to you about is the visibility. One of the things that the original Volkswagen microbus was so famous for, at least in some places, was the amount of glass that they had, especially if you had one of the coveted bay window models. And the ID.Buzz is no exception here. It has that same massive amount of glass all around. The windscreen is huge. You have two very capable windshield wipers that kind of operate opposed to one another, meaning that the majority of the screen is wiped to give you great visibility. You've got these front quarter panels that are front of the A-pillars. You've then got massive amounts of glass here in the driver and front passenger doors. Then you've got the sliding doors in the second row, and they both have electrically operated sliding windows, which means you have the opportunity to have some ventilation for the second row passengers. The third row passengers don't get opening windows, but there's still a substantial amount of glass in there, which means that everybody gets a really nice view of the world outside. You also have the option of a full-length glass roof. Now, unlike many minivans and many EVs on the market today, which have fancy blinds or maybe opt not to have any kind of blind at all, Ford, I'm looking at you and your Mark E, not to mention Tesla and some of its vehicles. The ID.Buzz takes a technology that's been in the Porsche family of vehicles for a while now, photochromic roofs. Now, how they operate is at the flip of a switch, the roof goes from being transparent to opaque, which can help block additional solar radiation from the inside of the vehicle, but can also improve the privacy for the passengers inside. And then if it's not a bright sunny day and you want to just see the rain splashing on the roof, you can do that. Just flip a switch and suddenly your roof goes from being opaque to being fully transparent. That panoramic roof, though, is just one of a number of features that you would normally expect to find in a luxury vehicle that Volkswagen is bringing to the ID.Buzz. And yes, the ID.Buzz does have a slightly premium price point, but it definitely packs a lot of features for that particular market segment. If you buy the rear-wheel drive variant, you get 7 seats. So you get 2 front seats, you get a bench in the middle, and then you get your 2 rear seats. You can also opt for the rear-wheel drive to add captain's chairs for the second row, which effectively turns it into a 6-seat vehicle rather than a 7-seat vehicle. And that costs extra for the rear-wheel drive. If you have the all-wheel drive model, you can get that with captain's chairs. So that, I believe, defaults to being a 6-seater. But the second row seats are electronically cooled and heated, which is a very nice feature. And the front seats are also electronically adjustable, heated and cooled, and they even have a massage function. Now, I am not a fan, unfortunately, of seat massagers. I never have been, never really liked it. I've tried it on this car. It's okay. I'm not somebody who can really tell you how good or not it is, because whenever those seat massage functions turn on, I just become irrationally angry and aggravated. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about it. What I can tell you about, though, is that the fact that there are power sockets absolutely everywhere on this vehicle. Every passenger gets their own dedicated USB slot. The driver gets 2 dedicated charging sockets for their stuff right here. And there's also a pocket right here to inductively wirelessly charge your phone if it fits. I have one of the new Apple iPhone 16 Pro Maxes, and combined with the case that I have it in, which is an impact resistant case, it doesn't actually fit in that slot, which is why I'm a fan of tray-based wireless inductive charging pads. But there's a really good reason why the ID.Buzz doesn't have that. And the reason is that the inside of this vehicle, in keeping with the whole microbus thing, is really practical and very easily customizable. The center console here is attached to the floor of the vehicle using 2 foldable hooks, and that means at the push of a button, there's a button right here, I'm not going to press it while I'm driving, you can actually lift this entire console unit away, which means you then have access to the rear of the vehicle without necessarily having to get out. And that is wonderful. That is a feature that many people are going to appreciate, especially if they want to do a little bit of ad hoc road tripping and camping in this, and just, you know, fold the rear seats down and put a mattress in the back. That's possible, and I think it's a great feature. But you can also buy additional ones of these consoles and put them at other points in the vehicle. So there's a space for the second row passengers to have one if you opt for the captain's chair, and I think there's also one further back as well, which allows you to make sure that everyone has access to a cubby to store things, to put things, and I think that's a really nice feature. Talking of practical features, you have a wonderful cup holder here. This is my Patreon mug, and it fits wonderfully in the center with some lovely warm coffee. Thank you, Volkswagen. It's very cold today, but you can also fold that away if, again, you want to have that open plan feel to your vehicle. And just behind the cup holders, within easy reach, are the buttons required to allow you to operate the sliding doors. Now, there are 2 sliding doors, one on each side, and you can operate the left one or the right one, and there's also a center button here that allows you to turn off the motorized doors. So if you have small people in the back who like pulling levers, nothing will happen. That's a very sensible feature that is a must-have, I think, for any parent. One of the nice features about the ID.Buzz, in keeping with the rest of the ID family, is the ID light. The special light that is embedded just underneath the windscreen that communicates things to you while you are driving. Right now, I am following the route that has been planned by Volkswagen, and the nice thing about the ID light is that it flashes and pulses blue in the direction it wants me to go when I next need to change directions, which means that I can carry on filming this review while also following the navigation without having to glance down at the touchscreen display. It's a really nice quality of life feature that I didn't think I would appreciate as much as I do, although I will note here, in this particular variant, it only seems to pulse twice. So if you're not really paying attention, I do wonder if you might miss the 2 rather obvious, but nevertheless the 2 pulses to tell you which way you should be going. That said, ID.Buzz does come with head-up display as standard, which means if you configure it right, you also have your satellite navigation right ahead of you as you're driving along. It's an overcast day for the most part here today, and I'm not wearing sunglasses. I expect if I was wearing polarized sunglasses, it wouldn't be quite as clear or easy to see, but I can see how fast I'm going, what the speed limit is, and how far to my next turnoff and where I should be headed. It's all very nice and very easy to see, and despite the fact that the windscreen is a really long way away, I can't reach it, the driver information pod, the dashboard, whatever you want to call it, right in front of me, is lovely and close and is very easy to see. It doesn't have information overload. I can customize it using the view button to just have the speed limit and how fast I'm actually going with my battery state of charge and my range, or I can have it with more comprehensive information like where I need to be going next with the sat nav and what the driver assistance features are doing. So all of that is great because it's fully customizable, but it's no nonsense in its approach. And look, the touchscreen display on this vehicle and the responsiveness of the ID system is so much better than it was a couple of years ago. I can switch to my radio, I can switch to settings for the vehicle. It all happens pretty instantaneously. It's very evident to me that Volkswagen has worked extremely hard to try and play catch up to its early ID buggy software. And yes, this is a production version of the ID.Buzz. It's not a pre-production vehicle. But if the other vehicles rolling out right now have that same kind of snappiness and responsiveness, I think Volkswagen has solved it. Obviously, for the most part, I've been driving on 2-lane roads here. I haven't been doing a lot of highway driving. And I think, honestly, that is partly because Volkswagen knows that on the freeway this is going to be a little bit noisier. And I did take it up to higher speeds where allowed, and yes, you definitely do notice some wind noise when you are driving at speed. But what do you expect? This has the aerodynamic qualities of a brick. It's not exactly going to cut through the air. It's not an Aptera, so it's not going to drive or sound like an Aptera slicing through the air when you're doing 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. But what it is at those kind of speeds is incredibly stable. And look, I've just recently driven the Volvo EX90, a car I kind of bemoaned for being a little bit ungainly on corners and not very comfortable in twisties. And, well, that is not a problem that the ID.Buzz has. Now, the rear-wheel drive variant, the one I'm driving right now, is very competent. It is a little bit slower, as I noted earlier, to 60 miles an hour. And on twisties, you do feel that perhaps it doesn't want to tuck in quite as much as the all-wheel drive version. But for everyday driving, this doesn't feel markedly different to me. And that's very unusual because normally there is a vast chasm between a single and dual motor vehicle. And to be honest, if you do not need to wind this up a canyon every morning, I might actually consider the rear-wheel drive rather than the all-wheel drive variant, because you do get a few extra miles of range per charge. And this is exceptional. It handles pretty close to the all-wheel drive variant. The suspension and the steering response is very similar. It just gets the job done. We're coming to some downhill now, so let's talk about regenerative braking and how that works in the ID.Buzz. Unfortunately, there's not really a true one-pedal driving setup, but you can put the ID.Buzz into B mode, which simulates engine braking. And to be honest, the blended brakes are pretty good. If you tap the brake pedal lightly and the car thinks that you can use regenerative braking, it'll let you regenerate. If it needs the friction brakes, those friction brakes will bite. And I was able to do a very, very, very brisk stop from 70 miles an hour earlier to standstill. It was quick. It was no nonsense. There was a little shimmy as the back end caught up with the front, but by golly, we stopped in a very short order. And in terms of safety, this is packed with all of the usual safety features that you would now expect from any vehicle, whether it is a minivan or a microbus or an SUV or just a family hatchback. You've got your blind spot warning systems, you've got your adaptive cruise control, and you've also got a kind of a level 2-ish system in terms of lane keeping assist, and also paired with adaptive cruise control. One of my bugbears about the ID.Buzz is that it has capacitive buttons. It's something that I hated about the ID.4. It's something I'm not a fan of here. All of the buttons on the steering wheel are capacitive, which means you just have to brush your arm against them, especially if you're someone who likes putting your hand up here as I do. All it takes is literally just brushing your hand against a button and you've activated a mode, or you've changed the station or whatever. And earlier on today, I accidentally activated the radar assisted cruise control as I was driving along a road like this. The car very competently found its way through this twisty road at 30-35 miles an hour, and not at any point was I worried about the capabilities of the car to keep me on the right side of the road and pointing in the right direction. Very impressive Volkswagen, very impressive. While it doesn't have true one-pedal driving mode, then it's very easy to control the braking of this vehicle and recover as much energy as is possible. And while I'm on the topic of driving modes, let's talk about the fact that there are several different ones. There's Eco, Comfort, Sport, and then there's a custom mode. And that's in addition to the basic, do you want drive mode or do you want B mode? B mode giving you a little bit of accelerator lift off regenerative braking to mimic an engine under engine braking, but certainly not enough to pull you to a complete standstill. The thing I like about the custom mode is that it allows you to pick between, you know, a fairly ecologically minded accelerator response to one that's a little bit more sporty. It allows you to tweak the steering feel, and it even allows you to change how the in-car cooling and heating works. If you want to prioritize range, it will change how that operates based on how you set up the custom mode. And that's good, especially considering the aerodynamic qualities of this car and the fact that if you want to road trip it, you may want to be a little bit gentle on the HVAC system. And I think that's worth talking about because, after all, this vehicle does have heated and cooled seats as standard, as well as, believe it or not, a 3-stage heated steering wheel. I'm really cold today. It's really cold here in the Bay Area, and so I've had the heated steering wheel active, and it's allowed me to stay nice and toasty warm. In closing, I do want to answer one very important question with this, and that is this a car that I could live with? And the answer is abso-freaking-lutely. Prior to this vehicle, the only 3-row electric SUV that I was confident recommending to people was the Kia EV9. And now I have another vehicle to add to the list, the Volkswagen ID.Buzz. It is family friendly, it is versatile, you can move the 2nd and 3rd row seats. The 3rd row seats slide out if you want to carry heavy things, you don't want to damage the folded rear seats. Unfortunately, the 2nd row seats do not remove, but it's versatile, it handles well, and it DC fast charges at up to 200 kilowatts, which is definitely an improvement on the original ID family of vehicles. Well, we made it back to the iconic Golden Gate Bridge, peeking out of the clouds as it so often does. This is about as San Francisco as it's possible to get. And at the start of this journey, I asked if the Volkswagen ID.Buzz could fit the space, the iconic space that the Volkswagen microbus left. I'm going to answer that later on in my conclusion, but before I do, there are some niggles that I have with this vehicle. First off, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but I feel that people should know that the ID.Buzz has two different sets of wheel sizes and tyre sizes, depending on whether we're talking about the front or the rear axle. At the front, you're running on 235 tyres, and at the rear it's 265 tyres, which means if you're somebody who likes to buy 4 identical tyres and rotate them, you're not going to be able to do that if you buy an ID.Buzz. My second niggle is really the low power capabilities of this vehicle on board. Sure, it does have an onboard power inverter, so you can hook up a 110, 115 mains outlet to your ID.Buzz and power things while you're driving along. You know, if you've got passengers that need to charge things up using mains power, that's possible. But there's not really a comprehensive vehicle to load strategy for this vehicle. Unlike its closest rival, which is the EV9 as far as I'm concerned, both in terms of price and capability, this comes out worse. The EV9 has onboard vehicle to load capability. You can run things from your vehicle in a power cut. And right now, I don't believe this has vehicle to load at launch. Although Volkswagen does plan on rolling out vehicle to grid capability for all of its ID vehicles. It started to do that. And so if you buy an appropriate two-way charging station for your home, you should be able to use your ID.Buzz to power your home appliances in an emergency. So that requires a little bit of extra work and a little bit of extra homework if you are looking at buying one of these vehicles. The other thing that I wish we had more of with the ID.Buzz was more functionality and more flexibility about the interior. The second row seats cannot be removed, at least not right now. And we've seen plenty of companies promise upfit products for the ID.Buzz, allowing you to turn this vehicle into more of a quasi camper van setup, which, let's face it, given Volkswagen's microbus heritage, is kind of a given. If you're going to be buying one of these, you're probably at some point going to want to camp in it. And Volkswagen does make that possible. They have a flexible rear arrangement with a kind of a foldable platform that you can use to lay a full-size bed in the back with nary a problem. So if it's just you and your partner and you want to go on road trips, yeah, you can camp in the back of this. And as I noted during the drive, you can move some of the interior pieces around to make that easier. But I do wish that you could easily remove those second row seats and fully open up the rear of this vehicle for maximum load carrying capabilities. That said, something I also didn't mention during the drive is that this thing can tow. All the long wheelbase North American market versions of the ID.Buzz come with a hidden tow hitch. It kind of pops up into the body of the vehicle and drops down, allowing you to tow. These are rated to tow. The tow rating does, however, depend on whether you choose the rear-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive. And as I noted during the drive, while the rear-wheel drive does feel a little more pedestrian and doesn't necessarily have quite as much pep as the all-wheel drive version, when it comes to towing, you are going to want to pick the all-wheel drive version, because the all-wheel drive version is rated to tow 3,500 pounds, while the rear-wheel drive is only rated to tow 2,500 pounds. That's a significant difference. It might not feel like it, but as soon as you get a trailer on the back of this, especially if it's a little sport trailer and you put kayaks and bicycles or maybe motorbikes on the back, you will notice that extra £1,000 difference in capability. And given the price difference, if you want to tow, you're gonna want to go with all-wheel drive. Talking of price, it's been another sticking point for us. Last night during our briefing, I asked if Volkswagen has any plans to bring a lower cost variant of the ID.Buzz to market. When I say lower cost, the entry-level model, the rear-wheel drive Pro, starts at just under $60,000 US. By the time you've paid your destination and delivery charges, you're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of between $61,000 and $62,000 US. Add on state fees for EVs, and that could even push towards the $65,000 US mark. No problem, I hear you say. Incentives are here, they'll lower the price. Except they won't. This is made by Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles, which is a different company to the Volkswagen car company. And so this is not planned to be made in any way, shape or form in the US. And that means, as I'm sure you know by now, it won't attract federal tax incentives. So if you want to buy an ID.Buzz, you're gonna have to be okay with paying $7,500 more because you don't get to benefit from any tax incentives. If we compare that to the EV9, which not only has a lower starting price in the mid-50s, and you can get the federal tax credit for US-made EV9s, that pushes it down into the 40s, and then this starts to look less like a promising deal. I was talking to various Volkswagen executives last night and I said, please consider a lower priced model, but right now there isn't one planned. Hopefully you and I and everybody else who's interested in this car can convince Volkswagen otherwise, but right now that starting price is a pinch. If you want the all-wheel drive version though, the good news is that the price difference isn't that large. You're going from just under $60,000 for the entry-level model to about $68,000 for the full top-end model. And again, add-on fees, add-on destination charges, add-on registration, and you're looking at somewhere in the low 70s. So if you are looking to buy into the heritage of the Volkswagen microbus and get behind the wheel of an ID.Buzz, be prepared to pay a Volkswagen premium. Yeah, I've never had to say that before, and during last night's press briefing, one of my colleagues in the automotive press actually asked if this was transitioning Volkswagen to a premium brand. The answer from Volkswagen was no, and there was some things uttered about the fact that electric vehicles are more expensive to produce and are therefore more expensive. If Volkswagen hadn't been proven wrong by competitors in the marketplace, fair enough. But there are competing vehicles being made right now that are undercutting the ID.Buzz in terms of price, and that is a shame. The ID.4 is suffering right now in the US because of its price and because of tough competition from other brands. Volkswagen's EV sales in North America have fallen. They just fell in Q3 by a sizable amount. This could be the halo car that Volkswagen wants it to be, but the price is a sticking point. So my advice, if you want a microbus and you want to buy into the dream of the Volkswagen microbus heritage and the ID.Buzz family, this is an exceptional vehicle. If you want a minivan that is family friendly and you do not want an SUV, this is your first choice. So much so that I would honestly consider buying one, and I haven't felt that good towards a Volkswagen since I sold my 1985 Volkswagen Golf City Stromer. It's that good. A car that I would genuinely consider spending my own money on. I just hope that the fact it's made in Germany, the fact that it doesn't attract incentives, and the fact that Volkswagen has already hinted there's going to be limited availability doesn't detract from what is otherwise a cracking all-rounder family vehicle, adventure vehicle, and so much more. Thanks to Volkswagen for inviting us to the Bay, for covering our flights and putting us up at a hotel, and we'll be back soon with more content. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got some thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room, our Patreon page, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers that you can sign up for from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just over $10 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Alan Brim, Jim, Sarah Horlock, full name, Todd Johnson, Roderick, Stuart Despain, Rupert Ronson, Larry Phoenix, Darla, Wendy Kelly Bundenbaum, and Kay. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll also find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have a good old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at, address also linked below. And of course, if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below. Don't forget that Halloween is coming and we've got some great designs for the season. We've also got some great content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think this one is well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving.